The obsidian walls of the High Synod of Valkyr hummed with a resonance that was more felt in the bone than heard by the ear, a low, thrumming vibration that signified the immense power coursing through the station's heart. This was the citadel of the eternal flame, a structure suspended in the gravity well of a dying neutron star, serving as the political and spiritual apex of the Valkyr ascendancy. Here, the light was always dim, filtered through shifting nanite shields that turned the lethal radiation of the star into a soft, violet luminescence that bathed the council members in the colors of royalty and war. High Exarch Thaurian sat upon the throne of cinders, his carapace polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the anxious faces of the 60 subcommanders and diplomatic viziers gathered in the amphitheater below. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and pheromonal anxiety, a chemical cocktail that betrayed the uncertainty rippling through an empire that had not known fear for 10,000 cycles. They were the masters of the arm, the architects of the galactic order, and the purgers of chaos. Yet today, the holographic projection floating in the center of the room commanded a silence so absolute it felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing against their spiracles. The projection displayed a sector of space that had long been disregarded as a barren wasteland, a region of dust and commercially non-viable stars located in the remote Orion Spur. For millennia, the Ascendancy had mapped the galaxy, categorizing species into 3 distinct tiers: the servile, those fit for labor; the martial, those fit for auxiliary combat roles; and the sovereign, a title reserved exclusively for themselves. But the data stream pulsating before them defied categorization. It showed expansion, not the chaotic viral spread of a hive mind, nor the slow, methodical creep of a silicon-based empire, but something erratic, energetic, and bafflingly silent. The species known as humanity had been flagged by deep range augurs only a standard cycle ago, a primitive biological civilization confined to a single wet rock. The mistake, Thaurian realized with a slow grinding of his mandibles, was in assuming that the data from the deep-range probes was current. Due to the vagaries of light speed and subspace distortion, the Ascendancy had been watching a ghost, an image of humanity as it existed centuries prior. The reality, now updated by a scout corvette that had barely escaped with its sensor logs intact, was terrifyingly different. "Explain this again, Vizier," Thaurian commanded, his voice a deep rasp that echoed off the obsidian facets of the chamber. "You claim they have colonized the entire spur in silence, without subspace beacons, without warp trails. Physics dictates this is impossible. Expansion requires energy. Energy creates noise. The silence implies emptiness, yet you show me a garden." Vizier Kredok, a slender, multi-limbed scholar whose carapace was etched with the silver runes of the science caste, stepped forward, his movements jittery. He manipulated the hologram with a wave of a manipulator claw, zooming in on a binary star system on the edge of the human zone. "It is not that they do not use energy, High Exarch. It is that their energy usage is efficient to a degree that borders on the unnatural. We look for the waste heat of fusion drives, the subspace tier of warp engines. The humans appear to have bypassed these crude methods entirely. They utilize a form of dimensional folding that leaves no wake. We did not hear them because they walk between the raindrops of reality. They have built Dyson swarms not to capture energy, but to mask their stars. They are hiding, High Exarch, an entire civilization hiding in the dark." A murmur of disbelief ran through the martial caste representatives. General Vruck, a scarred veteran of the Hager Wars, slammed a heavy fist onto the railing of his podium. "Hiding implies fear, it implies weakness. If they possess such technology, why do they not project power? Why do they not claim the core worlds? They are cowards skulking in the shadows. We should not fear them, we should flush them out. A civilization that hides is a civilization waiting to be conquered." Thaurian looked at the general, his compound eyes narrowing. The logic was sound, according to Valkyr doctrine. Strength was to be displayed, power was to be exerted, to hide was to admit inferiority, and yet a cold sliver of doubt pierced the High Exarch's confidence. The scout ship's data showed massive structures, orbital rings that encircled gas giants, and fleets of ships that drifted without active propulsion, appearing as dead asteroids until the moment they moved. "And what of the contact event?" Thaurian asked, turning his gaze back to the Vizier. "The scout corvette, did they attack?" "No, High Exarch," Kredok whispered, the bioluminescence on his throat pulsing a fearful blue. "They observe." Ed, the scout captain, initiated standard intimidation protocols. He locked weapons on a civilian transport to demand submission. The human vessel did not raise shields. It did not charge weapons. It simply ceased to be there. One moment it was on the sensors, the next it was gone, displaced by a localized gravitational shear that nearly tore our Corvette apart. Then a message was beamed directly to the Corvette's core computer. Not a threat, not a plea, a single binary string. "Decode it," Thalrian ordered. "It translates roughly to, 'Tread softly, for you wake the sleeper,'" Craddock said, his voice trembling. They let the Corvette leave. They could have destroyed it instantly with that gravitational manipulation, but they allowed it to return to us. This was not mercy, Exarch. It was a warning. General Vruck scoffed, the sound like grinding stones. "Arrogance. They perform a parlor trick and issue a cryptic riddle, and we tremble. This council has forgotten the face of war. I propose an immediate pacification crusade. We send the Fourth Armada. We burn a path to their home world, Earth, and we demand their submission. If they possess this folding technology, we must take it. If they are hiding, we will drag them into the light. The galaxy belongs to the bold, not the silent." The debate raged for hours, a cacophony of clicking mandibles and shouting voices. The philosophers argued for caution, citing the Fermi paradox and the danger of unknown variables, while the warriors demanded action, fueled by the indignation that a lesser species would dare to ignore the hierarchy of the stars. Thalrian listened, feeling the weight of the Empire on his shoulders. He looked at the hologram again, the silent, dark expanse of human space. It felt like looking into the mouth of a deep cave. Finally, the pressure of tradition and the fear of appearing weak before his generals forced his hand. The Valkyr had never backed down. They were the apex. To hesitate now would be to invite insurrection from the vassal species. "Silence," Thalrian bellowed, the sound amplified by the chamber's acoustics. The room froze. "General Vruck is correct in principle, if not in tone. We cannot allow a potential rival to grow unchecked on our borders. We will not commit the entire Grand Fleet, but we will send a subjugation force. The Fourth Armada will enter the Orion Spur. They will seize a peripheral colony. They will demonstrate the might of the Ascendancy. If the humans wish to hide, we will light a fire that forces them out. Prepare the fleets. We strike before the next cycle turns." The die was cast, and the machinery of war began to turn. Across the Valkyr systems, immense shipyards roared to life. Dreadnoughts, miles long and bristling with antimatter cannons, disconnected from their moorings. Legions of shock troops were awakened from cryostasis, their minds flooded with tactical data and loyalty indoctrination. The Fourth Armada, a force capable of glassing entire star systems, gathered at the staging point, a massive display of geometric perfection and raw firepower. They believed they were marching to a quick victory, a police action against an upstart species. They did not understand that they were not marching into a war, but into a test, and the humans were the examiners. The transition to human space was jarring. The Valkyr warp drives tore through the fabric of subspace, emerging into real space with a violent release of Cherenkov radiation. The fleet arrived at the edge of the Sigma Draconis system, a binary star system identified as a major human industrial hub. Admiral Zograth, commanding the flagship Hand of Judgment, stood on the bridge, his four arms folded behind his back. He expected to see panic. He expected to see primitive chemical rockets scrambling to intercept them. He expected the electromagnetic screech of a terrified civilization begging for mercy. Instead, he found silence. The sensors swept the system. There were planets terraformed and green. There were orbital stations, vast rings of spun metal that glittered in the starlight. But there was no chatter, no panic broadcasts. The human ships present, massive, blocky haulers and sleek, needle-like vessels, simply drifted. They did not power up weapons. They did not raise shields. It was as if the arrival of a world-ending armada was as inconsequential as a passing cloud. "Comms," Zograth barked, unnerved by the stillness. "Broadcast the ultimatum." The communications officer, a young drone with trembling hands, activated the wideband transmitter. "Attention, human vessels and planetary governors. This is Admiral Zograth of the Valkyr Ascendancy. You stand accused of unauthorized expansion and potential sedition against the Galactic Order. Power down your vessels. Lower your planetary defenses. Prepare to receive our boarding parties. Resistance will be met with immediate annihilation." The message went out, repeating on every frequency known to physics. As the crew of the Hand of Judgment waited, 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. The tension on the bridge grew suffocating. The Valkyr were used to fear, they fed on it. This indifference was alien to them. It felt disrespectful. It felt like a trap. Finally, a response came. It was audio only, a voice so calm, so devoid of inflection that it sounded synthetic. "Valkyr vessel, you are trespassing in a quarantine zone. Your weapons are active. This is a violation of the third protocol. Please deactivate your weapons and withdraw to the heliopause. We do not wish to engage. Zograth stared at the comms panel, his mandibles twitching with rage. They dismiss us. They treat us like a traffic violation. He turned to his tactical officer. Target the nearest orbital station. Fire a warning shot. Main cannon. Burn a hole through it. Let them see that we do not negotiate with primitives. The ship shuddered as the main antimatter cannon charged. A beam of pure white energy, capable of cracking a moon, erupted from the prow of the flagship. It streaked across the void, closing the distance to the human station in seconds. Zograth watched the screen, anticipating the explosion, the debris, the screams. The beam hit the station, or rather it hit the space around the station. There was no explosion. There was no flare of shields. The beam simply bent. It curved around the station as if the space itself had become fluid, diverting the energy harmlessly into the dark void behind it. The laws of physics seemed to hiccup. The station remained untouched, spinning lazily. "Report," Zograth screamed. "Did we miss?" "No, Admiral," the tactical officer stammered, his eyes wide with horror. "The beam was redirected, gravitational lensing, but on a microscale and with impossible precision. They didn't block it. They just changed the path of light and energy. Admiral, I am reading energy spikes from the human ships. They aren't powering up weapons. They are powering up engines." On the tactical display, the human fleet began to move. But they didn't turn to face the Valkyr. They didn't form a battle line. They simply accelerated straight toward the alien fleet, not at combat speeds, but at a slow, inexorable drift. And as they moved, the sensors began to scream. The mass readings of the human ships were fluctuating. One moment they read as standard alloy, the next they read as having the mass of a black hole, then the mass of a feather. "They are manipulating their own inertia," the science officer whispered. "Admiral, if a ship with infinite mass hits us even at slow speed." "Open fire," Zograth roared. "All ships free fire, destroy them." The Valkyr armada erupted in light. Thousands of plasma torpedoes, kinetic rails, and laser batteries poured fire into the approaching human formation. And then the true horror began. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't return fire. As the projectiles neared them, point defense lasers didn't shoot them down. Instead, the space around the human hulls shimmered. The plasma torpedoes vanished, shunted into pocket dimensions. The kinetic slugs lost all momentum instantly, dropping uselessly into space. The lasers refracted into harmless spectrums of light. The humans were not fighting. They were wading through the fire like a man walking through a gentle rain. The leading human vessel, a dreadnought of matte black geometric shapes named the Kantian Imperative, drifted alongside the Hand of Judgment. The sheer size of it eclipsed the Valkyr flagship. It was silent, dark, and terrifyingly majestic. Then the boarding began. There were no explosions, no cutting torches. The Valkyr bridge crew simply watched as the airlock doors of their own bridge dissolved into mist. Standing there were not armored monstrosities, but 5 figures. Humans. They wore simple, sleek suits of white and gray, no bulky power armor, no visible weapons. Their faces were exposed. They looked soft, fragile, pink, and brown-skinned, with no natural armor or claws. Admiral Zograth drew his plasma pistol, his honor demanding he fight. "Die, primitive!" he screeched, firing point-blank at the lead human. The bolt of superheated plasma struck the human's chest and dissipated like steam against a cold window. The human didn't even flinch. He stepped forward, a look of profound tiredness in his eyes. He raised a hand, not in a fist, but palm open. Zograth felt a sudden, crushing pressure on his mind, not psionic, but technological, a suppression field that locked his neural pathways. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He dropped the weapon. The lead human, a man with graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen the heat death of the universe, tapped a device on his wrist. The translation matrix crackled. "Admiral," the human said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "I am Director Vance of the Sol Diplomatic Corps. I apologize for the intrusion. We tried to warn you. Kinetic violence is obsolete. Please order your fleet to stand down. If you continue to fire, the automated defense systems of our vessels will interpret you as debris and remove you. We do not want that." Zograth gasped as the pressure eased slightly. You are monsters. You have no honor. You do not fight." "Honor is a luxury for those who do not understand the stakes," Vance replied, walking over to the command console. He touched the surface, and the Valkyr tactical displays shifted, rewriting themselves into human script. "We stopped fighting wars of conquest 3,000 years ago. We found that conquering others is inefficient. Integrating them is messy. We prefer gardening. Gardening, Zograth spat. You call this gardening? We prune the weeds, Vance said, looking out the viewport at the battle that wasn't a battle. The Valkyr ships were drifting now, their engines dead, their weapons locked. The human ships had disabled an entire armada without firing a single lethal shot. They had simply turned off the enemy's ability to be dangerous. And sometimes we have to build fences. You broke the fence, Admiral. Vance turned back to Zograth. We are bringing you to Earth, not as a prisoner but as a witness. Your High Synod needs to understand what you have done. You didn't just attack a neighbor, you attacked the Watchtower. The journey to Earth was a blur of impossible physics. The Valkyr ships were towed, not by tractor beams, but by localized space-time distortions that dragged them across the sector in hours rather than weeks. Zograth spent the time in a comfortable, albeit locked, guest quarter. He was given water, nutrient paste that matched his biology perfectly, and access to a library of human history. He read, he watched, and his arrogance slowly turned to a cold, hollow dread. Learned of the human history of war, the atomic fires, the biological plagues, the eras of total annihilation. He realized the mistake the Valkyr had made. They thought humans were peaceful because they were weak. The records showed the truth. Humans were peaceful because they were terrified of themselves. They had perfected the art of killing to such a degree that they had to outlaw it entirely to survive. They had built a society of logic, ethics, and restraint because the alternative was a galaxy devoid of life. They were not sheep. They were wolves who had learned to meditate. When they arrived at Sol, Zograth was brought to the surface of Earth. It was a paradise, a blend of technology and nature that made the Valkyr industrial worlds look like scrapyards. He was taken to a building that floated above the ocean, a structure of glass and light. There he met the Council of Sol. They were not warriors. They were scientists, philosophers, poets, and engineers. High Exarch Thaurian, watching via a quantum-entangled comms link established by the humans, saw his admiral standing small and humbled before the human leaders. High Exarch, the head of the council, a woman named Alara, spoke to the screen. Her image was projected into the Synod chamber back on the Valkyr homeworld. We have returned your fleet. We have repaired the damage to your ships. We have healed your wounded. We ask for nothing in return but a promise. Thaurian, his pride bruised but his mind sharp, leaned forward on his throne. What promise? You have humiliated us. You have shown that our weapons are toys to you. Do you demand our surrender, our servitude? No, Alara said, her expression sad. We demand your silence and your help. Help, Thaurian scoffed. You are gods compared to us. What could you possibly need from us? Alara gestured and the lights in the room dimmed. A new holographic map appeared. It showed the galaxy, but not as the Valkyr knew it. It showed the edges of the galactic disk, the dark halo where stars were few and the void was deep. In that darkness, there were red markers, moving, millions of them. We did not expand into the Orion Spur for resources, Alara explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. We expanded to build a wall. We have been listening to the dark between galaxies for a long time. There is something coming, something old, something hungry. It consumes biological matter. It consumes energy. It is a swarm that makes your empire look like a single grain of sand. Zograth, standing in the room, felt his legs give way. The great filter, he murmured, the ancient myths. They are not myths, Alara said. They are here. We call them the entropy swarm. They have been asleep in the intergalactic void, but they are waking up. Our activity, our quiet expansion, was an attempt to reinforce the galactic barrier without waking them sooner. But your attack, the energy discharge of your fleet, it was like ringing a dinner bell. The silence that fell over the High Synod of the Valkyr was different this time. It wasn't the silence of political tension. It was the silence of prey realizing the pred. Ader is in the room. We calculated that we had another century to prepare, Alara continued. Your aggression has cut that time to a decade. We cannot fight them alone. Our technology is advanced, yes, but we are few. You are many. You have billions of warriors. You have the industrial capacity to build walls of steel. We have the science. You have the numbers. We need the Valkyr not as subjects, but as brothers in arms. Thaurian stared at the image. The red tide on the map was vast. It threatened to swallow everything. The humans, the Valkyr, the serval races, the entire history of the galaxy. The petty squabbles over borders and pride evaporated in an instant. The mistake of attacking humanity had not been a military blunder. It had been a cosmic catastrophe. They had tried to burn down the house of the only people who knew how to put out the fire. But there was also hope. The humans were offering a hand. They were offering trust to the very people who had tried to exterminate them hours ago. It was a level of ethical fortitude that the Valkyr religion spoke of but never practiced. Thaurian stood up from the throne of cinders. He removed his ceremonial helm, exposing his face to the camera, a gesture of ultimate vulnerability and honesty. "Director Alara," Thaurian said, his voice echoing with a new gravity. "The Valkyr ascendancy is... Sorry, we looked at you and saw a rival. We did not see the shield. We have spent our existence perfecting the art of war against each other. It seems we were practicing for the wrong enemy." He raised his fist to his chest, the salute of a subordinate to a commander. "The Fourth Armada is yours. The Grand Fleet is yours. Our forges will turn from conquest to defense. Teach us your shields. Teach us your logic. And we will lend you our rage. If this swarm comes, they will find that the galaxy is not a pasture. It is a fortress." On Earth, Admiral Zograth looked at Director Vance. The human smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. "Welcome to the real fight, Admiral," Vance said. The alliance was forged not in ink, but in the cold realization of survival. The humans, the calm, terrifyingly powerful gardeners of the stars, opened their archives. The Valkyr, the proud, militaristic conquerors, humbled themselves to learn. Ships were refitted. Strategies were rewritten. The galaxy ceased to be a collection of warring states and became a single organism, united by the terror of the dark and the guidance of the species that had mastered it. As the years passed and the red tide on the sensors grew closer, the Valkyr looked at their human allies with a mixture of reverence and fear. They had made the biggest mistake in their history by attacking humanity. But in doing so, they had stumbled upon the only salvation the galaxy had ever known. The silence of the humans was not emptiness. It was the deep breath before the plunge. And now, standing side by side, the galaxy held its breath together, ready to scream defiance into the encroaching night.